Creating content is at the core of inbound sales and marketing. And to do so, you need the right person on your team to be creating that content, someone we typically refer to as a content manager. But what exactly is that content manager responsible for? It's a lot more than just putting words to the page, and we've recruited a bit of help to show you exactly what it looks like. On this episode of Solving Inbound, we're going to take you through the journey of being a content manager with a person who's not only set the bar, but exceeded it, Eli Simonson of Anderson Trucking Service. Let's do it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Solving Inbound. My name is Connor Delaney, joined by the wonderful John Becker and our special guest, Eli Simonson of Anderson Trucking Service. Eli, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to dive into the role of a content manager and really how you've grown into not only the role that you're in, but how the company has changed around that. But let's set the foundation first. Take us through a little bit of what Anderson does and your role in your industry.
Sure. Yeah. So Anderson Trucking Service is an industry leading transportation service provider. We've got four main divisions here. So ATS Inc. is our vans division. They do dry van, general commodities, those like boxed 53-foot trailers you see all over the highways. Yeah.
Sure.
So that's ATS Inc. Then they've got the ATS International, which does, international transactions. And then ATS Specialized Inc., which does open deck and heavy haul, those larger like flatbed and, those massive trailers you see like hauling construction equipment and stuff. Right. Down America's roadways, we do that. And then we've got ATS Logistics, which is a freight brokerage. So they are really the third party provider, right? So they're working with the carrier who has the truck and then the shipper who has cargo to move. So ATS Logistics is kind of that middleman.
Got it. So how big? I mean, you guys have got four, sounds like very big divisions. Like how many people work at ATS?
It's a lot, right? So we've got a lot. I'm in the corporate office. I'm in the corporate office in St. Cloud, and we've got about 600 employees, full-time employees in here. And we've got multiple outposts in the United States, and then an office in Germany. So all told, I'd say probably 1,000 corporate employees would be my rough estimate, and then on top of that, 1,200 or so drivers.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a pretty big
bit well-rounded. Yeah, a bit well-rounded. So take us through a little bit of how you play into that. I have to imagine that writing content for a trucking company is a little bit interesting, but take us through your role and how you've integrated with the team too.
Yeah. So my role as the content, I think my title is content specialist. They didn't give me manager right off the bat for some reason. But basically I manage, the digital content production for Anderson Trucking Service with that blog and any other written content, really. So my role is to produce articles that address those main fears, worries, questions, and concerns that a shipper, someone who has cargo to move would have throughout that whole process, kind of hopefully shorten the sales cycle in what is a historically an industry that the sales cycle is quite long. People are entering into contracts with their transportation providers for quarters or, half a year or a year at a time. Right. So just positioning ATS and working with ATS as the voice of trust, right, in a very oversaturated industry. So, yeah.
You talk about that industry a little bit. You say oversaturated. You just mean there's always someone willing to do it cheaper. There's a million options that everyone has out there.
Right. Yeah. So when you're thinking about transportation as an industry, and even from the perspective as of a company with goods to move, your transportation is purely a debit on your balance sheet, right? It's just an expense, nothing more. So yeah, it's very transactional in nature. And I think that's the way that shippers like it, right? But as a transportation company, it's hard to be in a position of power there, right? Because there's so many options, oversaturated marketplace. You can work with a bunch of different provider types. You can work with a trucking company on that has a fleet of trucks. You can work with an individual trucker, or you can work with a freight brokerage, or a third-party logistics provider is another one of your options. So, it's just differentiating yourself in such a field like that can be very challenging. So
making people want to work with you versus working with the lowest piece that would add up on your debit on your balance sheet. Yeah. So take us into, because I think a lot of industries are gonna agree with that. They're gonna feel like people are always going to be looking at that price and that cost. So take us through what it looks like, maybe in your day-to-day, but in your role as a content manager, for you to break down some of those barriers and make Anderson Trucking be someone that people are going to seek out versus just looking for that price. Because I assume, maybe you can answer this question too, that you're probably not the cheapest service either, I would guess.
No, I don't think we are the cheapest, and I think that's something that our salespeople are always battling against. But the decisions that are being made by these companies that are shipping products, it is like very, very price driven. It's like they want the cheapest price and the highest possible service, but you can't have both, right? You have to pay for service. The cost of transportation services is the cost of the service. So as far as positioning ATS as that most sought after transportation provider in the industry, which is kind of the slogan around here, right? That's kind of the lofty goal we've set for ourselves. I think that this digital content and answering these questions and being the one right there to answer the question when the prospect has it or the shipper has it, and being the one to do that is a crucial piece in becoming that sought after provider. Yeah. But it is difficult, right? We're always struggling against that price objection. So the biggest thing you can do is educate them on where their prices are coming from, right? And talking them through what is going to happen if they do, in fact, choose that lowest cost carrier.
Setting the expectations ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, there's also something of a stigma against freight brokers in particular. ATS Logistics is a pretty massive freight brokerage. And there's a stigma against just the broker in general, right? That you're the third party. You've never you're not shaking hands with these drivers, right? This is not a truck that you've ever seen, right? You're just connecting me with this third party who has the means to actually move my freight. So there's a stigma against freight brokers where it's like, they're just going to try to, I don't want to call it like price gouging, but it's like, they are increasing my price to make a higher margin on my freight.
Yeah.
Where working without a third party and going directly with the carrier would be a little bit cheaper, in their mind. However, that's not always the case. And so, yeah, you're breaking it down for them in a way that they can digest. And like, here is, our job, here's how we make money. And this is how we make money, so it's not, it's difficult to, I don't know. It's a difficult thing to do.
So that feels like a really specific objection that, as you said, your salespeople are hearing. How do you, as a content manager, or more broadly as a marketing team, how do you get ahead of that and control that narrative and build that trust for people who are not only looking at you compared to your competitors, but looking to circumvent the service you provide to knock a couple, knock dollars off their cost?
Right. So first, I think the largest thing that I do as a content producer is I work alongside the sales teams, right? We're breaking down those silos like you talk about at Impact a lot, where, your marketing team and your sales team traditionally have been in, separate wings of the building, doing separate things, maybe not collaborating as much as they could be. So what I'm doing as a content producer is I'm meeting with the sales team or members of the sales teams and helping them address these concerns with, written content. Okay. So you get an objection, we don't work with freight brokers. Okay. What does that tell us about what is the real fear, worry, concern at the root of that objection? Right. And a lot of the time it is price driven. So what you do there is you talk, you answer questions about, okay, how does a freight brokerage price your freight? Right. Okay. How does a freight brokerage make money on your freight? Okay. How can you save money on your freight shipments? Okay. Yeah. Your freight, we've priced your service a little bit higher than everybody else, but here's why, right? Here are the things that are dictating your price, and here are things that you could do differently. Okay, that you don't need to have, you don't need to tarp that freight. We could instead, shrink wrap it and save you money that way. So things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So you're educating them on, and a lot of companies that are moving cargo, like they know what they're doing. The people in those roles are very tenured and they know what they're doing, but there are still things that slip through the cracks. And so just being there, right, to educate them, and then writing up the article, and then having the sales team share it with them in that situation. Making that connection though is kind of difficult.
That connection with the consumer, or the connection with the sales team?
Connecting the consumer to the content. So if I produce the content and the content's on our website, but the sales team doesn't, know how to use it or know when to use it. So that kind of thing that's something that you're constantly working on as well. But
can you take us through that a little bit? I think a lot of companies struggle with that of, okay, now we have this guy on our staff. And remind us, Eli, how long have you been with Anderson Trucking?
Started March 1st, 2021. So about 14 months.
Gotcha. So over the last 14 months, what's it looked like for you to not only start producing content, but working with the sales team and really getting them bought in on using the content? To your point, it's not really doing a lot if it's just sitting there on your website and nobody's actually seeing it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, as you can imagine, we kind of talked about just the size of ATS as a whole is just massive. And I came into this role not really knowing what I was getting into. I was the only member of the marketing team doing content like this, customer facing content. And obviously this is like doing content production in-house is a big investment for any company to make. And the fact that ATS made it in me was both humbling and also harrowing, right? Because it's like sink or swim here, Eli. So, I came into this role with I observed a lot of support from upper level management, right? So those members of leadership, the Scott Anderson, right? It's a family owned company. So Scott Anderson, one of the owners of the company, was very, very behind this effort. A couple of sales directors were right there with me, and my marketing manager was very supportive. So together, those people really opened the avenue through which I was able to thrive. And yeah, so I wasn't really having to fight the battle of getting the buy-in, but there are, I still 14 months later run across instances where it's like, these people don't care or they don't want to participate. I don't know. So it is difficult. You just learn you kind of navigate your way through that. And obviously we have a lot of in-house expertise here and a lot of people that are interested in educating the customer and working with me to produce content. So, I don't know. I'm not as involved in the sales training.
Gotcha. But it seems like it's really a company effort. And then John, I'll toss it to you. Like the leadership buy-in was critical. And it sounds like that probably happened pretty early, as I'm assuming you came in pretty early in that journey too.
Yeah. The leadership buy-in was massive. And it wasn't just like normal leadership, where like, they would be there, like they were there to support me whenever I needed, but it was also like servant leadership in that like, hey, I'm going to go out of my way to help you do this. Right. So I did not feel like I was on an island, even though it could have easily felt that way and would have been very discouraging. And yeah,
it was not only an effort, but a priority.
Very much so.
It's important to remember, and I think for all of our listeners to hear too, that even in a company with that top to bottom buy-in, with that servant leadership from the top ranks, you're still saying that you have people who say, I don't see the value. Well, they say, I don't want to do this, which is a code for I don't see the value, or I'm not going to make the time, or whatever else it is. So I think that's important for people to hear, that there's going to be varying levels of commitment and buy-in, even in an organization that feels or looks monolithic from the outside, that top to bottom, everyone is on board with inbound marketing, with they ask you answer, or anything. So for anything like that. So if you encounter those sorts of colleagues who seem resistant or just sort of you sense a sort of eye roll in their response to you, do you just kind of look elsewhere, or do you try to sway them and get them over to your side?
I think starting out, I was a little bit more persistent with it, right? Because I had the backing of all these leaders around me, these company leaders who, had obviously bought into this and were obviously supporting it, and were, um, getting people around the organization excited about it and everything. So I was a little bit more persistent with those people that were not buying in, were not interested in participating in inbound marketing or helping me produce content or participating in any way or using the content in their sales cycle. So I was a little bit more persistent, but over time I've learned that just like the people that are resistant now, like they're just not gonna, those people, it's been 14 months now, right? It's like it doesn't matter. It's just not going to happen with them. So it's a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And
they may not see the results of it too, I assume.
Yeah, that's the problem. Communicating the results of it. Like as a salesperson, they're very focused on selling. Obviously they have very, very aggressive goals set for them. And I'm not really sure they ask you answer or assignment selling is really built into those goals or compatible with those kinds of those goals they have to hit monthly. So they're very, and they're very concerned about meeting those goals. And obviously what they've been doing has been working.
Right.
Right. So like, why would I drop everything and help marketing write something? Write a piece of content today where I could pick up the phone and make a sale.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. Great point. And I think it's important to, obviously you want everyone bought in, but I think it's important to recognize that it takes some time for people to learn and buy in fully. Even, and the more you force it, the more you kind of close that door and people will become even more resistant.
Yeah. And you find that more with more tenured, salespeople who have been in the profession, who have been in the position for a long time and have a well-rounded book of business, and have developed certain tactics for selling, which have served them well.
Got them to where they are.
Yeah, got them to where they are. And this whole inbound method, or they ask you answer, educating the customer, like, no, I would never send that to my customer. Why would I do that when this is working for me? So yeah.
So take us through, let's do your week to week, because I think day to day can get a little too in the weeds, but take us through your week to week. You're producing 2 to 3 articles per week, I would assume. But you mentioned that you're working alongside the sales team and interviewing them. So what does that typical 5-day work week look like for you?
Yeah, I think it varies based on my content schedule, but I've really learned in this job to plan your work ahead of time, well ahead of time. You can only control what you can control, right? There's always going to be those people trying to fit your schedule into the schedules of everyone else just isn't going to work. Right. So, I mean, week to week, it could vary. I could be doing, 4 interviews over the course of a couple of days and then writing the rest of the week. I could be, writing the first half of the week and not doing any interviews until Friday. It really depends on, what my schedule, dictates, what current content I have in the pipeline, any struggles I'm facing. But a lot of it is like, it's administrative work, like just trying to get interviews set up, meeting with salespeople. It's usually a 15 to 30 minute conversation to flush out the main points of a topic and kind of educate myself in a way that I can write an article on it. So it's that, and then it's a lot of writing. And I do other things, like writing email campaigns as they come up, as the need arises. So, yeah.
So 14 months into this journey, Eli, what are the accomplishments that you're most proud of that you can point to and say, yeah, I did that?
Yeah, it is really cool. It's exactly that, John. So it's really cool to see, the inbound traffic has increased a lot. So when I got here, I think ATS's website was maybe doing 13,000 sessions a month. And last month, so April, it was doing like 52,000 sessions right? So that obviously the impact there is undeniable. So that's cool to look at and point to and say, wow, I did that. As far as just views of our blogs themselves, it's been like a whirlwind increase, right? It's not even comparable to when you're looking at year over year metrics. We're doing over like 35,000 views of the blog a month.
Wow.
Converting those sessions to contact. We've consistently been doing more of that every month, right? So you've got those 30,000 or so sessions. You want to convert those to contacts. And then from there, you give it to a salesperson. The salesperson converts it to customer. Hopefully, right? That's the funnel you're trying to create. So I've seen a lot of that, like a progression of that, right? So we go from 10,000 sessions a month to 20,000 sessions to 25 to 30. We're getting 15 contacts in the beginning, 60, 80. So you can see the influence of the content I'm producing. It is very hard work. I'm not going to lie to you. It is, to sit down and write these comprehensive articles is a lot of work, but that is the payoff, right? You can point to that and say, I built that. I built that. So that kind of thing is very cool to see.
So let me ask you the kind of flip side to that, which is, if you were to speak to yourself 14 months ago, knowing what you know now, is there any piece of advice that you would give to yourself starting out, or to any content manager starting out who might be new to a role, new to a company, new to a industry? What have you learned in those 14 months that you would tell someone who's just starting out?
Just keep plugging away. It's a very slow burn. And I think for me in particular, it was slow just because, ATS before I got here wasn't doing any content, right? So the search engines, they're not accustomed to seeing content come out of this website, right? They don't have any idea what we're specializing in, right? They don't know what we have the authority for. So it was a slow burn. It was, 4 to 6 months of pretty stagnant, growth. So if I was to talk to someone in my position, and I think that a lot of, content writers are going to be in B2B positions, right? Where they're writing pretty technical pieces of content, which can be, it can be kind of draining, right? It can be mentally draining to write an article on one, very specific piece of educational content, and then turn right around and write it on something else that's maybe completely different, but just as specific and technical.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be kind of draining, and it can be difficult to see that, what am I doing here? Right. Like I wrote this, I put all this time into it, and it got maybe, 10 page views last week.
Right.
So that's the slow burn thing. It's very difficult. So yeah, I think my main advice to someone in my role is starting out is like, it will happen if you're doing the right things and you're putting the right, emphasis in your content, right? You're emphasizing your things like your titles and your meta descriptions and your heading depth, stuff like that. Stuff that matters to SEO. If you're doing all the SEO best practices, this is going to pay off for you in the long run. And it is that. I really think it is that repetition and that consistency that's going to get you there. So,
Love it, Eli. It's really, it's great insight, and it's consistent insight from some of the other interviews that we've done. The biggest thing people have said is patience and consistency tend to be the two characteristics of successful, they ask you answer organizations and successful inbound organizations. Is that 3 to 6 months, you're going to want everything to come right away, but know that it's going to, we like to call it the reverse hockey stick. It's going to happen pretty fast once it's found its grounding. So, last question before we wrap up here. And, we want to know what's next. So you've been doing this for about 14 months. What does the future of Eli at ATS look like? What are going to be your focuses? How's your team look? What's the future look like?
It's hard to know. It seems like we're growing fast, as a marketing team, at least. So I started here. I was the sixth or seventh member of the ATS marketing team. Now we're going on 10. So we're growing fast, right? I think it's this impact that we're making. I think that they ask you answer and doing inbound content gave the marketing team here a lot of legs, right? I think that it gave us a lot of a lot to do going forward. So there's always more things to do. For myself personally, I'm a big proponent of like, especially as a marketer, is like seeing your constraints, okay, and then hammering in on, okay, how are we going to solve for these constraints, right? So we have our website sessions are going up, but how do we convert more of those sessions to contacts, right? So I think that going forward, I think that my main goal is going to be to try to figure that out, right? Whether that's going to be doing more pieces of premium content, which we talk about with you guys at Impact, or finding out different ways to position pieces of content, on the as far as CTAs and everything like that. So that's what's going to look like for me. We are a growing team. We added another content writer. We added someone for our driver recruiting side. So the problem with having all this success internally is you can't grow if you don't have employees, right? So, especially as a trucking company, and you need truck drivers. They are doing all of the work that we are supporting them on. So we need more truck drivers, and so we have we're starting to do inbound content and assignment selling training for our driver recruiting side of the business.
Awesome.
So we brought on Cassie a couple of months ago, and she's doing an excellent job thus far. So we'll see where that takes us. Yeah.
It's a great reminder where, it can feel, as you guys were both saying before, that there's this leap of faith at first where you have to believe in the principles and stick to them. And then you see it take off. And then you're in this position that you talked about, Eli, where you're doing a lot of tweaking, you're doing historic optimization of older content. You are, doing these kind of, you might not see that continued exponential growth. You're going to see continued growth, but now it's all about sort of refining those processes, getting better, doing the things you've been doing that at first felt like it was just going a million miles an hour. Now you can kind of like take stock, improve, and tighten.
Yeah. I think that's a large part of my day to day is kind of shifted in that, like I've stopped trying to get 3 articles a week, and I've been doing 2 articles a week and something else, right? Yeah. And that something else at this point has been historical optimizations, right? So going in and looking at, okay, which piece of content can I update now that will give me the most immediate results, right? And I'm working with a content trainer at Impact, obviously, to kind of work on this kind of thing. But like, what articles are ranking on the first page of Google that aren't ranking in the top 3? Okay, let's look at how we can optimize and kind of get into that 1 to 3 range. So yeah,
going back and winning some of those kind of the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, and I put so much time into this content initially that I might as well go back and make it the best it can be. So
yeah, continuous optimization. So Eli, I've got a couple rapid fire questions, just things that didn't hit the radar when we were first chatting, but I want to make sure that we cover. Sure. You flexed a lot of expertise in the industry that you're in. You brought up tarping versus shrink wrapping and all those things. Was that knowledge that you came in with, or was that knowledge that you've learned over the last 14 months? Because I think a lot of content managers struggle with that, and a lot of people hiring them struggle with the same thing.
Yeah, no. No, never in a million years would I think that I'd know this much about transportation or trucking or any of that. No, I didn't come in with any of that knowledge. That's all stuff I learned through. The cool thing about being a content manager is you get to speak to the most interesting and well-rounded and well-educated people in your organization, right? They're truly the experts in what you do. And I've developed a little bit of expertise myself, even though I've never moved a load in my life. So yeah. So just writing, if you write about something long enough, you become an expert in it. And I've been developing that over time. So
right. I'm sure it makes it easier for you to develop that content and to just know what you're looking for even too. I'm working with content managers myself. It tends to be a struggle of I'm not really sure what to ask in those interviews and how to know that I got the right piece of, the right context from those people too.
Yeah. And I think that as just as a marketer, as you're developing these skills, like even if you're not in content production, but the more you know about the service or the product that you're selling, the better suited you are to do your job, right? You can develop email campaigns, you can develop social media stuff, you can hone in on your target audience a lot better. I think that you, as a content manager, learning all these things, you are going to be a valued piece of your organization just because you have all of those insights.
Eli, last question for you, and then we'll close things out. What is your favorite term or phrase that you have learned from the trucking industry?
I like the term bobtail.
Okay. And what does bobtail mean?
I think bobtail is when a semi truck drives without a trailer attached to it. That's bobtailing. Right. Yeah. So I'm sure you'll see some bobtailing out on the roads.
I was going to say, I think I saw
never knew there was a word for it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of terminology in the transportation industry.
I'm sure. Well, Eli, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Solving Inbound. Not only a ton of insights, but a really fun conversation. And I think you certainly taught myself and John a lot, but I'm sure our listeners a lot too. But again, folks, this has been another episode of Solving Inbound, where we were joined by Eli Simonson from Anderson Trucking Service to talk through the journey of being a content manager and the learnings and the experiences that he's had within it. So Eli, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, definitely drop a like and leave a comment, or if you're listening to us on your preferred podcast platform, leave a rating and share it with a friend. But until next time, my friends, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.